Hi there, I'm Fred Holmes, and you're watching a podcast where nostalgia comes to life. It's called Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show. Roll it!
Welcome to Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show, the podcast where nostalgia comes alive. Since July of 2021, Jake and his friends have interviewed professionals in the worlds of acting, directing, writing, puppeteering, and many more. Who will they be chatting with in this week's interview? Find out in this Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show episode.
Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show, where nostalgia comes alive. I'm your host, Jake Deffinbaugh, and today, as always, our co-hosts, Chris Bixby and Matt Bingel. How you guys doing?
We're good.
I'm good, Jakey. How you doing?
It's great here. I'm doing great as well. Thank you. And Matt, what do we have for today?
Today's guest is a writer and music composer. He worked on Sesame Street for many years, starting out back in 1981, and composing songs such as Caribbean Amphibian and A New Way to Walk, among others, as well as the 1994 special Stars and Street Forever, commemorating Sesame Street's 25th anniversary. He also created the character Placido Flamingo, introduced on Sesame Street in 1986, as well as writing for Muppet Magazine, which we'll also get into. He's also written some episodes for Reading Rainbow, starting with an episode during its first season way back in 1983. Among many others, here he is, Mark Saltzman. Mark, happy to have you here.
Happy to be here. Good to meet you guys.
Likewise, happy to meet you too.
Yes, you too. How are you?
I'm good. Another sunny day in California.
Nice.
Awesome.
Nice.
Good to
Nice.
hear.
So,
Where are you guys?
I'm in Massachusetts.
And
me, Matt,
Jakey and I are in Maryland, about an hour and a half from each other.
What's your town in Massachusetts, Chris?
Harwich in Cape Cod.
Oh, okay. I've been to P-Town. That's
Oh, nice. Love P-Town. Yes,
yeah, beautiful.
definitely.
Nice.
So what was your background like, and how did you grow up?
I grew up right across the border in New York, in the Hudson Valley, Yonkers, just north of New York City. And I don't know, I was following show business and music from a really, really early age, kind of unhealthily early. And it was always what I wanted to do, even if I lied about that to my parents. And I went to college, also in the Northeast at Cornell, and studied English, studied theater. There really wasn't much film study there now. I don't even know if there is. I mean, then there wasn't, and maybe now there is more. But so I didn't study video or film, but it was mostly theater that was offered. But found my way into TV when I was in New York.
Nice. Nice.
awesome. So, what made you want to get into writing?
You know, it was like, I thought all the way through school it was just a way to kind of avoid the assignment. You know, like whatever the heavy research thing was, I stumbled into it. If you somehow wrote something creative or funny, if it was funny, the teachers just went crazy over it. Now I see why. You know, they're reading all these essays about you know, my worst moment of childhood or something, or my unforgettable aunt and uncle. And when you wrote one that was funny and actually entertained the teacher, they just gave you an A because they had a good time, I guess. But I sort of learned that trick and, you know, kept getting encouraged to do more of it. I didn't think of it as a career. I just thought of it as a way to sort of work around doing assignments. And I guess I still am. You know, I guess I'm still working around. I'm still getting away with it because of this skill. I also was studying piano, and those two wound up working together, being a writer and knowing music so well. It was sort of inevitable. Musical theater and I would find each other.
Nice.
And Sesame Street, since we're here to talk about that, one of the few shows that had a musical component. You know, earlier on there was TV variety, was
Right.
all over the airwaves. But by the time Sesame Street came along, the late 60s, it was kind of gone. I just saw an article with Carol Burnett, who's having a big birthday and a tribute, and she was saying when the network wanted her to do a sitcom, and she pushed for comedy variety, and they said, "Oh no, that's gone. That's out with Sid Caesar. That's the last decade." But she held in there, kind of for the same reason. She was a musical theater performer. She didn't just want to do sitcoms. She wanted to sing every week, and with that voice, why not? And Sesame Street was also one of the last. It wasn't really modeled on Carol Burnett show or Sid Caesar early. I take it you guys are aficionados of TV and know the history and all.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So
Right.
the original comedy variety on TV was basically vaudeville, with a host.
Right.
And different acts came out, and even Ed Sullivan was like kind of the last vaudeville show, right? Because and now the opera singer, and now the Beatles, and
Yeah.
it
Mhm.
nothing connected. It was, and that's what vaudeville was. And here's the performing seals, and now here's the Spanish dancers, and it was kind of already fragmented in the American entertainment mind. But Sesame Street used a little of that because of the musical component, but really the main model was Laugh-In, because the fast cutting that was invented. I mean, that was the technology of Laugh-In, that you could not just stand there on a stage and do jokes, but you could, do the setup for the joke here and the punchline there, and it's all within 15 seconds. The miracle of video editing, and that fast moving, really ultra fast approach to comedy was hotter than what we're talking about, Carbonette style at that moment. So the Sesame Street style got a lot from that. The recurring comic characters, if Laugh-In had, I don't know, the guy on the bench and with Buzzy hitting him, we had Bert and Ernie. And we
Right.
had Buzzy for that matter, and never realized that she transitioned to Sesame Street after Laughing. So we
Nice.
keep that DNA, yeah.
So now on the subject of Sesame Street, how did you begin working on that?
Oh, that's interesting too, because that has musical theater at the core. There was a review off Broadway called "My Name Is Alice," which was kind of a review about the state of women's culture and advancement in the 1980s, which was kind of a big feminist moment. And in that review was Elena Reed. Do you know who she is on Sesame Street?
Yeah, she was one of the human cast members for a while. Yeah.
Yeah, she was Olivia.
Yep.
Um, and she's so talented, and she's gone now. She had a sitcom following Sesame Street, and at that point, at My Name Is Alice, she was on Sesame Street. She was doing off Broadway. She was all over. She had a cabaret act, and Miss Elena Reed, and I loved writing for her on My Name Is Alice, and I just kind of got her, and it just clicked between us. And all my stuff I was bringing in for this review was basically for her. And when the show was over, Elena kind of, just threw me in a duffel bag and brought me up to Sesame Street and said, "You're going to write for me here now." And Elena usually got her way, so I got an audition, which is the way the writers came in there, and I already was a sketch writer. I was an off-Broadway sketch writer, and it wasn't hard for me to crack the formula for Sesame Street. And I have Elena to thank for getting me there and everything that flowed from that. I didn't thank her enough when she was alive.
So, what was it like meeting and working with the rest of the Sesame Street cast and crew for the first time?
You know, the first time, I kind of remember being on the set for the first time, and I remember Bob was the one who welcomed me.
Oh, rest in
Aw.
peace.
You know,
Aw.
Rest his soul.
yeah, and it was so in character that he'd be the one, you know what I mean? That he'd be the welcome wagon for the new writer.
Right, yeah.
And you know, that got me over whatever nerves were going on. I had I guess I felt secure in this comedy sketch thing. As I said, it was something I was doing off Broadway. And when I didn't realize, when I was on the inside, I realized this, and maybe other people have said this to you, but that's the Sesame Street writer skill, is kind of classic old school sketch writing. You know, it like setup, premise, you know, elaboration, further complication, blow off, you know, and it was kind of extinct at that time, which is why finding writers was so hard. Children's book writers would come to work on Sesame Street, it's a children's show, and not make it and be frustrated. But that wasn't it. Writing a, you know, picture book, or writing even a longer form children's book, that wasn't what the show was. The show was sketch comedy. So if you didn't have that background, meanwhile, down Fifth Avenue, there's another sketch comedy show, Saturday Night Live, that is paying network wages, and who would want to go to, you know, poverty-stricken PBS when if you had those skills, you could be on Saturday Night Live or one of the spinoffs.
Right.
So that made it even harder because you kind of had to have a certain devotion to Sesame Street. And for me, it was as much the good work of the goals of Sesame Street. One of the things at Cornell, I also took a teaching degree because several reasons. I didn't know what I was going to do when I graduated. I wanted to have a teaching license, and there was a war on, and it was kind of a good idea to teach so you could be exempt from the draft. So all that, I had, you know, Cornell education classes and childhood education, all this. So I had that extra skill for Sesame Street. So that also motivated me to stay for as long as I did. And also the chance to write music, which is pretty rare in television. And the two sides, you know, the writing and the composing, are generally very separate, you know, different buildings even. But here at Sesame Street, I could, you know, if it was a lyric, I could go down there and, oh, Joe Raposo is in today, my hero. You know, Joe, would you set the, you know, and that kind of thing I've never stumbled on again. That might be what I miss most, is being able to see a song from conception to production so quick. I can remember, I think my most successful song I wrote for them was Caribbean Amphibian, if you know that.
Oh yeah, love that song.
Thank you.
Yes.
And I remember it was something had fallen out, or they had extra time or something. I just remember running back to my apartment in my piano and banging that out and running back down, you know, not within an hour, but within a day or something, and coming back in, and oh yeah, you know, that'll do it, that'll fill it. And it could move so fast, you know. One of the frustrations out here for writers is it can take years and years to get something from, you know, pushing print to hearing it come out of an actor on camera or on stage. And this was all so fast, and it's a daily show, you know, so much material had to be generated.
Right, definitely.
Oh, we call it generated now. In those days we called it written. So much material had to be written. Yeah.
So now, do you remember the very first thing you wrote for Sesame Street?
Yeah, this is going back so far, but what I remember about it was, if I wasn't writing music, I was often writing about music, like Placido Flamingo is about opera, and I wrote a jazz thing. I can't remember, but I called for a jazz trumpeter, and my head writer at that time was Norman Stiles, and he said, "Oh, who would you like?" And I said, I don't know. I didn't think about what trumpeter. I just thought some actor, He said, "Oh, no, no, no. Let's see if we can get Dizzy Gillespie." And my heart jumped up. Really? That kind of thing happens here? He said, "Yeah, yeah." So my first thing shot was with Dizzy Gillespie, who's coming in, and he's going to be the trumpeter, who's like just a random character. And that's why I'll never forget it, because I was in awe. And I remember one detail, nobody was sure what to call him, how to address him. Like, what would you say? How would you address him? It's Mr. Dizzy Gillespie, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what do we call him? It seems so kind of presumptuous. Dizzy, Dizzy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, Mr. Gillespie to a jazz guy. Oh, God.
I know, right?
No.
So, there we were, and you could kind of feel it in the control room, like who's going to go first. And I guess one of the directors, maybe it was John Stone, he was so smart. He went, "Hey, welcome to Sesame Street, Mr. G." And I "Oh, Mr. G, could you move over here?" And he was great, and that's why I remember that so much, because this giant of jazz was in my first script, and he was also very he was kind of shy about performing lines. He's not, a lot of musicians are like that. That they express themselves in music. So it was kind of trying to make him comfortable and on the spot. Why is the writer there to something like this can happen with the star? It wasn't that he was insisting on change this line. I can't say that. It wasn't that. It was more that you'd see him trying to get it out, and that he's not comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And let's give him something just that flows much more easily, and let's get him to the horn playing quicker, and things like that were going on. And this is how they do it at Sesame Street, on the fly. But it's still a great piece, and what a way to kick it off.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
You mentioned Norman Stiles. He's a good friend of ours. He's a previous guest. We had him on with Chris Surf.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yes, they're great.
Yes, we did.
Yeah, wonderful people. They're
Yeah.
again very good friends of ours too.
Yes.
Oh, okay, good.
Oh yeah, they were absolutely fantastic.
Yes.
Wonderful guests of ours.
They're like Bert and Ernie.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah,
pretty much.
I could see that. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
I mean, they've done so much together. It just
Yeah. Oh yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense to me. So, do you have any favorite episodes or sketches that you wrote for Sesame?
Well, that was one. I'm covering them. Really, when I think back, it's the songs. I remember a lot of sketches, but I have Google alerts for some of my song titles, because when I see, on YouTube, when I see a little girls ballet troupe in Minnesota, little, and they're doing their spring recital and they're dancing the Caribbean Amphibian, I just melt. How could this happen? And New Way to Walk.
Yes.
Yes.
Great.
Oh my
Classic.
Great
gosh.
song.
Classic.
Classic.
Yes.
And when they did that, the kind of supercut of it with the stars, that was terrific.
Mhm.
Every iteration of that.
Yes.
that was Joe Raposo, and that was another gift at Sesame Street, collaborating with Joe. And he died pretty. You probably, like the curse of Sesame Street, how many of the big stars died young. And Joe was one of them, I think his early 50s. And we had plans, we were going to do our Broadway shows, and it was such a good meeting of the minds with him. I mean, I admired him so much, and it was like he felt he needed me as a lyricist, which was beyond a compliment. And and there was another composer there, Stephen Lawrence, also got very close. He died last year. He lived a long life, and that was those were my people have asked me about the puppeteers and Jim and Frank and all that, but really my closest relationships were with the writers and the composers, and it could be kindred spirits, and the performers who also were writers, like Sonia, and Chris and Norman. I mean, that just seemed the way my heart seemed to connect to other people. There was on that level. Belinda Ward. Oh
yeah.
I'm still in touch with her. Her son was an intern for me at a regional theater that was doing a musical of mine. And
oh wow, nice.
Yeah, Matt. And so those connections still endure.
Definitely. So now, aside from episodes and sketches, you wrote for some of the recurring segments that they'd have on Sesame Street as well. What was it like getting to write for those?
Can you tell me some specific? I don't remember recurring.
Like stuff like Monster Piece Theater. So kind of stuff like that, like the stuff that would kind of recur throughout like each season.
Yeah. Monster Piece Theater. Oh, Twin Peaks, I think, was a Monster Piece Theater.
Oh yeah.
That. I think, yeah, I remember I was living out here then, and I just I was faxing in my scripts at that point, and I remember hearing back, I think from Norman, and he said, "Oh, we were trying to solve a Twin Peaks parody. We couldn't crack it, and then we got yours, Twin Peaks, and that's just the way to go." And they shot it, and there was a log lady on Twin Peaks, and this is the fun of writing for Muppets, is that you could give dialogue to any inanimate object, and so the log lady's log finally talked, even though she kept listening on Twin Peaks. She listened to her log, and she was deluded. She thought it was talking. But now we can have her dream come true and her log talk to her. And we got a letter from the actress, from the log lady, who was absolutely charmed by it. Another was the Sublime Miss M, the Bette Midler parody.
Oh yeah. Yep.
And I had a project when I was out here. I had a project with Bette that never got made, but I got to show that to her and Bonnie Bruckheimer and the whole thing, and that was when I was sneaking the gay content into Sesame Street before it was allowed on the air, and Bette Midler parody, and Placido Flamingo, the opera queen, and all that. That seemed to I don't know if it slipped by or they let it go by, but it was as far as the rainbowizing of Sesame Street on my pride is that I got it in there, I got it on the air, and the Sublime as Sam was really fun. I love watching that one again and again. I can't remember who the puppeteer was. Was it Danny Danny Epstein's daughter, I think, did the singing.
Oh,
And
Ivy Austin. Yeah,
Ivy
yeah.
Austin.
Ivy Austin, yeah, she's also a previous guest.
okay, yeah.
She's wonderful.
He got that Midler style right down. And I remember one thing about that. That Midler's backup girls were called the Harlettes. Well, certainly not Sesame Street appropriate. But then, she's the Sublime Miss M. Let's make her backups the Emmys. The Emmys. And I thought, would that be fun? Like, Emmy Award Muppets singing and, and swaying. And, apparently you don't mock the Emmys at Sesame Street.
Right.
So that got turned into the Mets or something like that. And it's still a great one. Even Tibet Midler, this was high hilarity watching herself Muppetized.
Definitely. Another recurring segment that you wrote a couple episodes for years later was Bert and Ernie's Great Adventures.
Yes.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Remember that so well.
Yeah, the animated version.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny with the animation. It I didn't feel as hands-on because you wrote it and then it went to these mysterious people who did this.
Right. Yeah.
Article. You're kind of not standing on top of it and tweaking in animation.
Right.
I mean, that's just the process. That's not a criticism. Sally Cruikshank, who animated Caribbean Amphibian, I can remember it was unusual because I just worked close. I was close to her because at that point I had started screenwriting, so I really now understood the frame by frame and storyboards and all this, which in comedy sketch writing you really don't have to know. It's you type you just type the script. But in screenwriting, really, serious or comic movie writing, you're doing storyboards, you're doing beat boards, you want to see it. So I think at that point I was sketching, or she was sketching, and I was saying, the frog hops to the island here now, 3 hops, and since the song was in my head, I could say, and the hops are on, he likes to hop in the tropical, however it was. And that, I kind of remember it, I think, because that was unusual to work with the animator that way. I guess she was in New York and maybe in the office, and we just grabbed a second and did that. But generally, that's why when you say Bert and Ernie's Big Adventure, I remember everything about it, the script writing, but I don't have a on-set memory of it because it wasn't,
Right.
in Bert and Ernie in the flesh, in the felt, I would have taken that in a different way, probably changing things and then asking for changes.
So, did you have any favorite Muppets or human characters to write for during your time on Sesame?
Well, as I said, Olivia, because I was obligated and grateful, and I tried to give her good songs. I think That Only Happens at Birdland. That was a song I wrote specifically for her, and she put the gardenia in her hair, and she went full Billie Holiday, and it was great. And as far as the Muppets, I kind of I kind of like these sort of off-brand Muppets that I like Snuffleupagus because he was existentially depressed. There was no reason for him to behave that way. You know, he had a friend, he had a life, but he had this Eeyore kind of gloominess about him that that I related to. I loved Prairie Dawn, and
Oh yeah.
Nice.
and one reason was the Muppets were all, you know, one way or another, you know, deeply disturbed individuals obsessing over cookies, for heaven's sakes, and Bert's practically OCD. But Prairie Dawn, and part of it, I guess, because she was the female Muppet and you couldn't make her crazy. She was so sane and rational in this world of insane characters that I always would model my sketches for her after Jack Benny sketches, because that was Jack Benny's shtick. Was he's the audience's surrogate up there, and he's wacky Danies and pestering him and making his life miserable. And he kind of is just trying to get through the days, just trying to be normal in this crazy world. And that was basically the premise of his comedy. It's brilliant comedy for 50 years. And using that as a model when Prairie Dawn, let's say, is on a game show, is on The Triangle is Right, and she's, you know, happy, oh, the triangle is right. Then the host, Guy Smiley, and the rules, the answer to every question is a triangle. And she goes, wait, this is a game show, and you know the audience, yeah, and everybody cheers. And the first and Guy Smiley says, it's a shape that has three sides, and the other contestant, well, I don't know, and the audience is grumbling. He goes, I know, a triangle, and everybody cheers. And she's, this is a silly kind of show.
Yeah.
It's like a night, like you would have that as a nightmare. You know, like after I was on this game show. and it was writing that way for her, and her pageants, you know.
Oh yeah, of course.
And those were, I can't tell you, and when you can play piano, not great, but well enough by like 5th or 6th grade, and every teacher and the principal knows they have a free musician for like the next 2 years. They have free music they have to bring in. I didn't realize that. I thought, I thought I was such a little genius. I was Mozart. I'm getting all these non-paying gigs, playing for assemblies and playing for fashion shows. And isn't this swell? And when I saw that, I didn't create the pageants, but when I saw them, I said, well, that's my late years of elementary and junior high. That's just what I always had to do, these insane shows that some teacher put together, and I have to play You'll Never Walk Alone or something as they're coming down to graduate. And there I was Prairie Dawn. So those came pretty easily too. And I think there was one where Bert was in drag. Now that I think of it, I wonder if they have to pull that in Florida. Yeah, but those were my doppelganger characters. The odd Kelly related to a little also. He kind of had issues.
Yeah.
But like he was sort of aware. Cookie Monster really didn't know he had a problem.
I know, yeah.
Right, but Telly seemed to know, like if only there was someone to toss me a lifeline.
Yeah. Love Telly. He's one of my favorites.
Yeah. Awesome.
And so on the subject of Muppet characters, we mentioned Placido Flamingo, which you created. Can you kind of talk about how that character came about?
Yeah, well, yeah, you're probably aware the Sesame Street office is right across from the Metropolitan Opera. You know this in New York geography. And I was, I think I started having my opera breakthrough. I didn't grow up liking opera. I love musicals. And it really wasn't until I moved to New York and had the Metropolitan, the City Opera was there, I started going and really loving it. And there'd be days of, being in the Sesame Street office and then dashing over for a matinee. And so it was always, music was part of the curriculum, not specifically any type of music. In fact, I wanted to expose the kids to as many different kinds of music as they could, which is really the way it should be done. And nobody was picking up opera. And it just, I don't know, my mind works in puns, and that was a general thing, Meryl Sheep and these kinds of name drop characters. And Placido Flamingo, what would that be like? And the process, sometimes they use a Muppet that was already built. I wish I could, maybe you guys would know, like, which puppet designer, said, oh, here's what he should look like, or, I know what a Muppet Flamingo would be. But that happened, and Richard Hunt, once again, the gayness underlying all of this, me writing it and Richard performing it. I think Flamingo even brings John Waters into this, but the character of doing this overinflated ego, because okay, now we have a flamingo opera singing puppet. Well, what's he like? And I kind of went for, the cliche of the tenor who's so narcissistic and so in love with the sound of his own voice. And we did that. Richard added that kooky accent, which isn't really Placido Domingo. It was almost like a generic European accent, so nobody could be offended because it's not really Spanish. It's not really
Right,
Italian.
yeah.
It's kind of, which is a kind of brilliance all in itself to make up like Latka on Taxi, the brilliance of Andy Kaufman to come up with an accent that sort of sounds somewhere in Eastern Europe, except it doesn't exist. And I think Richard came up with that. And then it was the most fun of all, going into the operatic repertory and finding arias. And the Toreador song became completely opposite. And the other writers like writing for him. They like doing the parodies, and it was a kind of, all of us are in show business, we're all dealing with narcissists all the time. So I think you got to take some pokes at that. And yeah, I was always pretty happy. Happiest when other writers picked that up, because I think I tried creating other characters. It's hard. It's really hard. The process you go through is maybe you create the character, and then one of the puppeteers tries to, not the puppeteers, the puppet designers try to visualize it. Like a cartoonist would draw, oh, does your talking mouse look like this? And Walt Disney says, oh, maybe he should walk up on 2 feet. There's a leap of creativity from that concept on the page to, and here's the look.
Nice. So did you have any favorite celebrity guests to work with?
I think it still comes back to Dizzy Gillespie. And because really, like, that level, beyond celebrity, that could be, a celebrity could be a Kardashian, it's such a cheap word. But had you phrased it, were there any great artists that you encountered in your life at Sesame Street? Yes, I did encounter a couple of great artists. One was Jim Henson. One was Dizzy Gillespie.
Hmm.
So yeah, that one I hold dear.
Wow.
As yeah, if you gave me, I don't know, the celebrities, they come and go. You know?
Yeah.
They're not celebrities for long, but you know, we'll never stop listening to Dizzy Gillespie and Jim's creations forever.
Right. Definitely.
Yeah, sure.
Mm-hmm. So you also wrote for the Sesame Street TV special Stars and Stripes Forever, which
Yeah.
commenced Sesame Street's 25th anniversary.
Yes.
What,
And
what was it like working on such a special?
you recall who the villain of the piece, who wanted to destroy Sesame Street and put up?
Yeah.
That's the one.
Was it Donald Grump? Was it that
It
one?
was Donald Grump. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
If only we had stopped him then. But at least we had the foresight to cast him with a gangster, with Joe Pesci. You know.
Yeah, yeah.
We
Oh,
didn't
yeah.
sound the alarm. We did. How much clearer could we make it? This guy's a gangster, and if you were doing a Donald Trump movie, cast Joe Pesci. That's where you want to go. He was terrific. Joe Pesci. Yeah, that was. I think that was probably my last big project with them. I remember I was in LA when they were shooting that, and there's not. Wait. I came in for the shoot. Yeah, I did, because I remember meeting. Oh, Susan Sarandon was on that too, and I kind of knew her, and Grodin, was Charles Grodin part of that too? I remember she was with a scene partner. I think it was him. You know, that was a really good experience. There were tons of rewrites. I was, you know, on a network TV payday instead of PBS, so that was welcome. But I can't think of any anecdotes on that set. It was in such bits and pieces. I think I was only there for the street part of it. And with a lot of inserts. I'm sorry, that one, it's more recent than the others, but it's not as lodged in my heart and memory as some of the PBS episodes.
Mm-hmm.
So during your time on Sesame, you won 7 Emmy Awards for your writing contributions. You know, how does it, feel to contribute to such an iconic children's show?
Well, it's a conversation opener wherever you go in the world. And everybody has their story they want to tell me when they hear I worked on Sesame Street about their kid or them or their grandchild.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a connection to the entire universe. And it was also another thing that did Shalom Sesame show up on your radar?
Like
Israeli Sesame Street?
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah,
I've heard of it.
yes.
Yeah.
So the first, I think this may have been shot even before my first Dizzy Gillespie episode. They were kind of concurrent, and as soon as I got there, this project was in process that Israeli Sesame Street had been on the air for a few years. It was called Rechov Street, Sumsum, and Sumsum is literally sesame in Hebrew. And they were going to take segments of Israeli Sesame Street, wrap English around it, and use it for teaching Hebrew in Hebrew schools and ulpans in America. But, great. And they saw my last name, assumed I was Jewish, and they said, "Do you know any Hebrew?" And I knew kind of enough to get through my bar mitzvah, not a lot, but at least I knew the alphabet. And they said, "Well, would you like to go to Israel?" And that had been a dream. And so I created this Shalom Sesame, and did just what they wanted. We had Itzhak Perlman as one host. He's Israeli born, and Bonnie Franklin was a co-host. And what a way to see a new country. We're running around from one location to the next, from Jerusalem and then up to Seacoast, onto a kibbutz. And Israel's such a small country that everybody knew this was going on. It was such a big press event that Sesame Street was in Israel to do this. And my hotel, I'm suddenly a minor celebrity. And we went 2 or 3 more times. And one time, thank you, Sesame Street, my father, who was widowed at that time, had the dream. The only place he wanted to see in the world was Israel. And okay, I'm going to be there shooting. I saw that he got on a tour, and he met me there, and it was a very, very deep and moving experience. We'd never been out of the country together. I don't think we'd ever been on a trip alone, and that's kind of one of my lasting memories of him. And that was, thanks to the Shalom Sesame experience. And I think it's still used. After I stopped doing it, they made more episodes, and I think they're pretty much part of kind of American Hebrew school curriculum. So the kids in Hebrew school don't have to be as bored as I was going through that.
Definitely. So, now moving on from your work with Sesame Street and the Muppets, you also wrote for another PBS series, Reading Rainbow. Can you talk about writing for that show?
Yes, I really enjoyed that a lot. That was my WGA card, so that has a deep spot in my heart. And I can't remember what the connection was. I'm really going back to the Bronze Age of my career now. But there was Cecily and Larry Pruitt. And they had the company, and they started doing it. It was really a very simple, unique idea. And in that kind of children's television, then there was kind of no money. And basically it was, well, we'll read them a book on the air and scan the pictures in a picture book. We could afford that. And I think LeVar was on at that point. Boy, it's going back, but it was kind of brilliant. And then as budget increased, they could do those kind of on the spot reporting that related to the book. And it was, I don't remember that being as challenging as Sesame Street, or I didn't get to write music. It really was just getting over the wall of getting into TV, getting into professional TV, becoming a union writer. It meant most to me that way. Oh, except for one episode called 3-Hat Day, and they were scrambling to get the people to do one-off characters with a couple lines. And I was there, and the character was a musician, not a pianist, a bass player. And I said, well, I'll do that. I think I could be a musician and wear a tuxedo and be on the way to a concert. And they said, okay. And I did it with LeVar. My scene was with LeVar, and he was great about it. He didn't say, who is this guy? What have you been in? He just, rolled with it, and I did my best to time my lines. It was grueling. I was sweating. I never wanted to do it again. But I had that buzz. I know when the actors talk about that buzz, they definitely had it. And it's funny, I last year before last, a friend of mine in TV got married, and LeVar was at the wedding, and I asked, do you remember this? And it was, 60 seconds. I don't know if you remember doing the scene. He said, I remember that scene, and I remember that day so well of shooting. I said, what? He said, because I was waiting to hear whether I was going to get Star Trek. I was on pins and needles all day. And when we finished the shoot, I called my agent, because we didn't have a cell phone, and I got the news I was going to be on Star Trek, and I was so thrilled. And that day is like on my calendar with a gold line around. Oh, good. I could be part of the day LeVar got to be Geordie.
Nice.
Yeah. That's probably my most vivid memory of Reading Rainbow, was not writing but acting. That's funny. I hadn't thought about that, but that's what I've always come back to in my head.
Hmm.
Yeah, amazing show. LeVar's great.
Yeah.
So you also worked on the Playhouse Disney series, Johnny and the Sprites, serving as head writer. What's it like
Yeah.
working on that?
What was it like? It was like taking the train to Queens every day. It was, I was living in LA at that point, and it was a strange thing to take on because I was kind of commuting. It wasn't, I was kind of spoiled by Sesame Street. Nothing was going to be that good again. And as I wanted to try the head writer gig just to see how that fit. Is that something I want to pursue? Because I also had at that point, screenwriting was going on, which I loved. My plays were getting produced, which I really loved. And it can only stretch so far. But Nancy Cantor, who is my Disney exec, was a Sesame Street friend, so I couldn't say no. And they made it very easy for me to go back and forth. I never could get that excited. I got to be friends with John Tartaglia, and I really wanted to pull this into something else. Disney has their Disney rigid rules, and the Sesame Street rules were much looser when you think about how much is possible. Johnny and the Sprites was more sitcom with the same cast and a beginning, middle, and end storyline every episode, like sitcom.
Yeah.
And this is really no affront to the show, which had been on a year. But I also found out not only don't I like this head writer thing, I never really was pulled towards sitcom. I'm kind of at this point, and musicals and TV and movies,
Right.
And sitcom, which I probably thought at the beginning, well, I guess I'm funny, I'm going to do sitcom. Anytime I've gotten near it, it didn't connect to me. It's a very rigid form. It's like sonnets. It's line, commercial break, line, and
Mhm.
and one thing at Sesame Street, for example, really a sketch could go as long as it needed to. You didn't have to think, oh, commercial.
Right.
You couldn't go 12 minutes, but it was kind of it was relaxed that way. And maybe if Johnny and the Sprites had gone on a few more seasons and I found footing there, maybe I'd have it. Like I say, I don't have a negative attitude. It's just kind of a blip on the resume.
Mm.
To be honest, there's not a lot of bad memories other than the train to Queens.
Yeah.
And it's certainly nothing to do with the people. There was
Right.
overlap in the crew, like some directors were Sesame Street directors and all that. But like I said, once you've been to the top of the mountain, and that's Sesame Street, all children's television is kind of not quite it. You know, you just don't have that level of talent and characters and freedom of expression. So yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, Johnny and the Sprites was a really good show, I remember.
Yes.
I'm glad you thought so. I did too.
Yeah.
And I also remember one episode that I wrote, because the crew hated me. One of the Sprites, there was always a spell, you know, like something happened and then they figure out how to get out of it. And this was like the Rapunzel spell, and her hair started growing and growing.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was purple hair. And
yeah.
and they so every time she appeared, they had to re-wig her with, you know, ever increasing hair. And you know, the whole joke was it was like filling up the room, you know, and they had to fight their way through her hair. But you know, that's funny on paper if you don't have to do the building, you know. And I could see, I could almost see it in their eyes. They're pros, so I'm not gonna show it, like, oh shit, how are we gonna do this?
Exactly.
Children's TV budget, and you know, the producers are so excited and loving it, and they did it. They were pros. They did it. But I remember when I came in the next Monday morning, I opened the door of my office and they filled the room with the hair.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So on the subject of Disney, you are also executive producer on a movie called The Poof Point for Disney Channel. Can you talk a
Yeah.
bit about working on that?
Yes, now that I love, because the original book, The Poof Point, was written by Ellen Weiss and Mel Friedman, who are dear friends of mine from my first publishing job in New York.
Oh, nice.
We all such were the times in the 70s that, you know, we were poor and real estate was amazingly cheap, rentals. And we found a brownstone, like a whole brownstone, unrenovated. And those two, me, other friends, we all moved in, and we were living on 101st Street in a brownstone with dumbwaiters and little washrooms off the bedroom, 1890s elegance. And they became children's book writers. And I was so happy that I could get Disney to entertain the idea of doing one of their books. And the executive producer, you know, that title can mean anything you want it to mean, right? Executive producer. It can mean the agent who made the deal. It can mean somebody who really works hard every second of the production to see that.
Right.
Well, you know, it's a spectrum of the responsibilities. But I wanted to be hands-on. I wanted to do what I could to protect their material. And we shot it in Utah. Salt Lake City was, maybe still is, a production hub. And that was, I remember that being a great, I also, one other, I flew to New York to watch the airing with them, you know. It was in September, and so this will be fun, this will be a party, you know. Your show is going to be on the air, we're going to have a great night, and the air date was September 13th, 2001. This I'll never forget. And I was in New York, and that happened. And 2 days later, the party turned into, we did watch, but it had a different mood, as you can expect. And but still, you know, Ellen and Mel still happy they were seeing their book on the air, and that made me happy, even though the city was in immense sorrow at that point. So that's odd, but that's the most vivid memory I have, is the night of the airing. You haven't gotten to Mrs. Santa Claus.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's where the musical theater people usually start with me.
Definitely. And I know the recently passed Angela Lansbury starred in that too.
Yeah,
Yes, she did.
Mhm.
Yes, she did.
Yeah.
that was the dream movie musical that Hollywood wouldn't give her. You know, that they wouldn't let her be in Name, which was her Broadway role, and this was kind of, well, um, I'll have Jerry Herman write a musical for me for TV. She was at the peak of Murder She Wrote, and they were looking for ideas. You know, what could Jerry Herman write for a TV musical? And that was one of my better ideas, was to do a Christmas musical and do it about Mrs. Santa Claus, because Jerry's great Jerry's great characters were, Hello Dolly and Mame were you know on the go women. So that came together, and I was happy to see that it was a kind of hit on YouTube this time around. It was shown last holiday season, and hundreds of thousands of hits. So Merry Christmas to everyone out there. I was glad to see that. I'm very proud of that one. It was
Awesome.
a tough shoot in July to do that, and with a gigantic cast, and they pulled it off. Terry Hughes, the director, and Rob Marshall was the choreographer, and look what he went on to do.
Exactly, yeah.
I think
Yeah.
he was a choreographer, but he was choreographer on another. I can't remember what his second. He did choreography for another TV musical, and then his next thing was directing Chicago. He jumped right from there. But
Okay, nice.
yeah, and wins an Oscar. And
Wow.
he'd never been on a film set before Mrs. Santa Claus. We're kind of saying, oh, well, no, do this and don't do that. And yes, you're allowed to talk about the editing that you want. Yes, you can. Not just the clips, and yeah.
Yeah.
Now that's a great movie. Angela Lansbury, talk
Yeah.
about acting legend,
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
Mhm.
everything. The one,
Really sad to hear that she died.
yeah,
Yeah.
nice, long, one of a kind life, and
And she got to live a really long life.
she did.
Mm.
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
think she was like in her 90s when she
95,
passed. Yeah.
95, yeah, and she was
Yeah.
performing into her 90s. I saw her in Blithe Spirit out here. I don't know what could have been, like 8 years ago, maybe. And needless to say, the audience was going crazy. If you know that play, she's playing a medium who comes in and does seances, and she's a little out of her mind, a little dotty, and so funny, and she just, people were eating out of her hand, just to be in a room with her.
Definitely.
There was, yeah, I'll go out saying, like, there's one more great artist that I was privileged to cross paths with Angela Lansbury. There's nothing to take away from her. I mean, now we look, my God, on top of everything else, she originated Mrs. Lovett in Sweeney Todd, and now we know that's like, one of the greatest pieces of anything to come out of America is Sweeney Todd, and there's Madame Lansbury.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Making pies of human flesh. What a role.
Yeah.
So aside from writing for TV, you worked on a few theatrical films as well. Can you talk about some of the film work you've done?
The film work?
Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, Milo Notice has kind of got me over the wall for doing movies. But I came in late on that. The shooting was done, and I did the narration, and working with Dudley Moore to get that precise. Mrs. Santa Claus I can consider one of the films, because at this point, TV, the films that are made for TV, the films that were made for TV and the films that were made for movie theaters are kind of all one bunch now. It's everybody's watching films on streaming platforms. The movie
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I think streaming's kind of taken over
Yep.
for the most part now. Because I mean, if you look at like
Yeah.
newer Disney movies, I mean, for a while, well, obviously because of the pandemic, but either way, a lot of films have just gone straight to streaming now instead of
Yeah.
theaters. That's kind of taken over the movie
more and
industry.
more, and the theaters are closing left and right.
Yeah.
AMC is hanging on by a thread here, and I don't know. I mean, it's an odd time right now to transition to how is AI used in filmmaking? I mean, the Writers Guild is about to go on strike, very likely, about AI, not just about this, but a major point will be how are AI generated scripts going to be used, because they will be, there's no doubt about it. But how do the real writers interact with AI scripts? Does the studio generate the first script and then the writer takes it from there, or is the studio not allowed to at all? This is a key point. Does the first draft have to be from a guild writer, which it is now? One thing they're talking about is if the studio can generate an AI script and say, this is the first draft, we're only paying you for a rewrite. That sort of upsets the whole way of doing business for the past, 70 years. So, there'll be movies, one way or another, and we're only the first union. Then come the directors. They're going to have some thoughts on AI in film creation. And then the poor actors, what happens now? Their image can be lifted and used however you want. So yes, would you like Ryan Reynolds in your movie you're making on your laptop? Well, sure. Here's the program. Put him in. Yeah. All of this is just about to explode. But whenever there's this kind of upheaval in Hollywood, talking pictures come in, and that's the end of civilization. Ask Norma Desmond. Movies had to be about gesture and face, and this is the end of it. Nobody's going to go. And then something wonderful comes of it, and we're in that kind of revolutionary moment. But the artists transform, new art forms emerge, and you guys are young enough to see some big new changes.
Right.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Very interesting times indeed.
On that note, is that a good one to end on?
Oh, we're getting close to wrapping up. Yeah.
We're getting close. Moving on from TV and film writing, you've also done a lot of theater writing as well for various festivals and that kind of thing. What's it like writing for such shows?
Well, I started out in theater, like I said. Hey, my name is Al. It's my first love. It's what I dreamed of doing. I was growing up in New York, so you're going to theater and you're seeing that in front of you. You don't see films being made. You see films on the screen, but you see real live actors on stage on Broadway. So it was always, theater at the core. And I guess I always wanted to be a playwright. I always wanted to be a writer in musical theater. I didn't grow up thinking I want to be a screenwriter or TV writer for that matter. I didn't know such things existed. And so I'm still most thrilled in the rehearsal room for a play. It's also it's the most daring thing, because there's a lot of other writers on TV, and you're surrounded. But if you're the playwright, you're the playwright. And on the business legal level, you own this thing. You're not selling your script to a studio. This is yours forever and ever. And if it fails, it's you. And if it succeeds, it's you. And your name's kind of there alone. Like, it's not the obscurity of being a TV writer. So that's a big attraction. On the business level, the money doesn't compare. So you sort of have to be funding your playwriting with something. I mean, it's like being a poet or a literary style novelist. You're generally a teacher too. So you have to kind of be in a position where you can do this. But I wake up in the middle of the night thinking of scenes in the play I'm working on, or ideas for plays. I don't immediately think, oh, here's a movie I want to do.
Right.
The process of, like I said, getting it through the machine to the place where you're actually on a set with actors saying your lines is so grueling and so time destroying, and rewrites and rewrites and rewrites. And then there's a new studio executive, and he isn't sure of the last rewrite. It's a miracle things get done. And I've had so many more movie scripts that I wrote that were not produced, that compared to my scripts that were, that I've more than enough to keep me for the rest of my life. I had one of my plays 2 years ago was on track to be shot as a film in England. Mr. Shaw Goes to Hollywood, with Simon Callow directing, and a little bug from China landed, and that was, it wasn't just me. It was so many productions that just shut down, and we're still trying to. When the House of Cards comes down, it's also delicate, because you have this actor and this star and this director, and they're not going to be available 2 months after, and they weren't available 2 months ago. And when that all collapses, we're putting up the card again and again and again. But meantime, I can get my play up and running in some small theater in Laguna Beach. I think my next one's going to be, and also the latitude of what I write about in theater. If you look over my theater credits and the subject matter, there's no children's entertainment. I mean, the issues that I tackle, or just the things that I think are funny enough to write about, they're not family unfriendly. I take up gay issues pretty easily, not exclusively, but it's something that draws me. How tough it is to be an artist. That's not really one for TV or for kids. But any artist is going to feel like weighing in on that topic of what it was like. It's your life. Write what you know. This is what you know. Struggle.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
I had one agent who told me nobody's interested in that, and then I had my first show produced, and it was basically about Scott Joplin. And his cross to bear was in 1908, I think it was. He had written an African American opera with a young African American woman as the central character on a mission. Now, who was going to touch that? Minstrel shows were the hot thing, but he was so determined, and it pretty much killed him trying to get this done. And it's brilliant, and it's called Premonitia. And I thought, well, there's there's a crucifixion waiting for its dramatization. And people didn't know about it, and it like had everything that touched me. It had music, it had artistic suffering, and it got produced at Pasadena Playhouse. That was my first thing, and I knew something started to shake and quiver. Oh yeah, well, finally, this is what I was meant to do. I had a great charm life writing, but all that was leading to this. I should be doing theater, and it's funny because it's somehow easier out here, because in New York, theater is such an overheated engine. I mean, literally, you will. People do readings, like closed reading, industry only, no friends. And still you go online that night and they're bitching about what a piece of shit it is, and only read it out loud for 6 people, and you thought, like, you didn't want that. And yet, like, the gossip and the tightness of the community. Out here, it's great because nobody gives a shit about theater.
Right.
It's great. It's great. I'm too busy talking about, the next Harvey Weinstein scandal or whatever, but theater. And so, I found it a comfortable place. I have my little team of players when we do readings. And these Southern California theaters have been great. Last year, I had Romeo and Bernadette off Broadway, and limited run last summer. Yeah, last summer. But that started here. That started in a little theater above a bowling alley, literally on Ventura Boulevard, sound insulated. You didn't hear the bowling downstairs by some miracle. But you start that and nobody notices. You go home, do your rewrites, and that's kind of how I've been. You really have to be persistent to get the stuff done. But there's so much joy in it for me that that's pretty much how I don't really go after television. If a movie thing came by, especially if it's based on my plays, I'll certainly pursue it and welcome it. But like I said, when we hang up on this, the next 2 calls will be about a new one of mine that I'm trying to find the world premiere for, and that's probably how I'll spend the afternoon. Not so much rewriting, but trying to get the pieces in place to do this.
Nice.
Awesome.
So on that subject, can you share anything else that you're currently working on?
The 2 are such high concept. I'm kind of a little hesitant to share them.
You don't have to. It's okay.
Yeah.
No
One something that I really was never attracted to doing and didn't think I'll fall into was the one-man show. Not me, thank you. I acted with LeVar. That was enough. But my lead guy from Romeo and Bernadette, and my producer from Romeo and Bernadette, they had an idea, and I really love both these guys, and they both came through with me. So yeah, so when I'm at the moment, what's in the open file is a one-man show that, well, you're in Maryland, and you're in Cape Cod, so if it goes up, I'll let you know. You can come down to New York and have a look.
Sure.
Nice.
We can do that. Sure. So, as we're getting close to wrapping up here, are there any words you'd like to say to those watching or listening who have supported your work over the years?
Oh my God! Thank you. I mean, really, from that first Reading Rainbow, I had no credits. I had some TV journalism, children's magazines, and children's theater. That was it. It's almost out of my mind. But another way in to the business in New York is children's theater, because there's always an audience. And these theater groups, if you say, just do my play, give me a tiny, tiny percentage, I just want to get a credit, you can get produced. And those people, I think when I went to Reading Rainbow, and this is never done, but I said, here's my children's plays, here's my updated Snow White. And somehow they saw a spark, maybe it was just like when I discussed the getting away with it, that I just made it funny. If I'm going to do Snow White, it's going to be, sorry, it's going to be funny. And they thought, oh, okay, he's got something. He's never done television, but he's got something. And so that's Larry and Cecily who saw that. And Sesame Street was life-changing. It was all the children's TV stuff I got as a result, including Milo and Otis. I was introduced to this guy works for Sesame Street. Well, he must be the top-notch children's media writer if he works at Sesame Street, and we have a children's movie. And even if I hadn't ever gotten near cinema, near movies, at that point, my partner was now deceased, Arnold Glassman. He was an NYU Film School graduate, and a film editor, and did tons of documentaries, and we were together 23 years. So he was like, drilling film theory into me, and you have to learn the movies, you have to learn to be a screenwriter. And so he was by my side. So I had the confidence to say, yes, I can do this. I can do this. It was a thing I knew, because I knew I'd go home to Ernie and he'd, walk me through whenever movie terms I needed to know to get sound mixing. There'll be a thing called sound mixing.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I had none of that before him. And then, I'm sure you, in researching me, you found my inadvertent outing of Bert and Ernie that got into the press in 20
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
And that was, that was Arnie, really. That was because here I was writing for Sesame Street. I'm Mark, my partner's Arnie. Like, what funny friends, what theater friends of ours weren't going to call us Bert and Ernie, if we're Mark.
Right. Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
It didn't have to be that witty a person. And also Arnie was very much a Bert type. A film editor has to be, you have to be precise. And if Arnie collected something, it would have been paper clips, and line them up exactly right. I mean, that was Arnie, and I was the jokester. Even though I looked more like Bert and he looked more like Arnie, the characters were exactly it. And I carry that over when dealing with Bert and Ernie in the writing. Well, it's us again, honey. And that, it wasn't in that thing saying Bert and Ernie were gay. It was saying that my writing for Bert and Ernie was influenced by me being in a Bert and Ernie relationship with my partner. That's what blew the lid off. If I had a wife and said she's a Bert type, no problem. But it was really more about my inspiration than outing them. But for a minute, the entire media ecosystem exploded. And but when the pieces came back down, Sesame Street changed their press release to Muppets have no sexuality to they're gay if you want them to be, which is a lot more evolved. And then I think the next year they had a gay family on Sesame Street. So, it didn't all go to waste. It wasn't,
Right.
it's
Right.
probably, as far as my gay activism, the most important thing I did, even though I didn't go in to do that, to do this as a gay activist stunt. What happened was really beneficial. You know, the accident that happened as a result was, I think, good for everybody, and especially good for gay families that watch Sesame Street. You know, there we are. You know, two dads and
Right.
and a kid. So
Yeah.
it took them long enough, but and maybe it had to be from the point of a rainbow gun, but you know, it had a happy ending, I think, for everybody. I know what I'll see about gay people who work on Sesame Street are very proud to have that, and it was always a kind of you know, lump in my throat that, especially in the 80s, especially when, you know, AIDS was rampant, and, you know, I'm writing on this happy little children's show and then rushing off to my second funeral of the month. You know, it was really like, what to do, you know, like how can I resolve my lives? And I tried,
Right.
you know, it was much too early, but I still tried, you know, could we do gay content? Can we have a gay family in the 80s? Much too early, but you know, you want to do something, you know. I wasn't a kind of at the barricades type, and I want to use my talents to do it. Probably now that I'm an experienced playwright, I could have done something on the stage, but I didn't have that skill yet. So, you know, this is what I did, and so okay, it didn't happen till the next century, but it happened, and I guess it will permeate now from Sesame Street, just like, you know, racial harmony images came down from Sesame Street to the rest of the things. It took forever, but you know, it did come down to, you know, almost standard children's media now, and let this be, you know, the blessing of the rainbow over the rest of children's media, and let them pick up what Sesame started.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So if people would like to connect with you, where can people find you?
Oh, I guess email, you know. Oh, you know, Facebook is probably the quickest and easiest. I don't have Instagram. You feel free to give out do you have Mark email?
Do I have the what?
Mark. My email starts with Mark.
Right. So the last question that we ask
And
all of
your
our guests
social
at the
description down
end,
below. So
that the last question that we always ask our guests at the end that Jake's about to ask. Go ahead, Jake.
yeah, so of course this podcast is called Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show. When you think of nostalgia, what do you think of, or how would you find, or in your own words, how would you define the word nostalgia?
Woodstock.
Oh yeah, Woodstock. Yes, I
That's
remember seeing a lot of documentaries about that. Yeah.
Again, that's my
Yeah.
generation. I was there. I had my 18th birthday at the Woodstock Festival.
Really?
Oh,
Oh wait, and
That must have been a crazy birthday. My goodness.
yeah,
Wow.
that's
Your 18th
wow.
birthday?
I'm just
18.
yeah, I turned 18. I
still.
thought, well, this is what adult life is going to be like, and it's funny because I have another Zoom interview coming up next week. They did a museum on the site at Woodstock.
Wow.
You know
Wow.
you're getting
Ooh.
old when your childhood is a museum, and
Right. Yeah.
and they were looking up. You know, they want to do video interviews of people who were there, and you know, we're starting to
Right.
not be there. And they contacted me because I wish I could just pull this out. Give me 1 second.
Okay.
Sure.
Because on the 25th anniversary of Woodstock, I wrote this book,
Wow.
Woodchuck Nation. Maybe you can on eBay or something, and it's like a retelling of the Woodstock legend for kids.
Wow.
That's cool.
That's
And
awesome.
through the book they found me, and you're the author of Woodchuck Nation. Do you want to? I'd already done Sesame Street by the time I did that, so it's full of like Placido Flamingo. There's like Jimi Hendrix, and these kinds of Sesame Street-ish. There's a little too much implied drug use for Sesame Street's taste in this book.
Yeah.
Implied, and the illustrator and I kept trying to like, how do we get away with it? Like, how can we tell the Woodstock story, without even like implying that there might have been a bit of mind altering going on. So we got that in, and but the people from the museum found me, and I think actually I may be doing that in 3-dimensional space, but they're going to do this interview, and I'm going to retell for the 1,000th time this story of being at having my 18th birthday, and having the strangers sing happy birthday to me and give me New York State champagne, and it was nostalgia. Are you kidding? Like what could I hold to my heart more than that birthday that like sort of rounded out, and like in a matter of weeks I was at college, childhood's over, and that was the transition, high school graduation, Woodstock, Cornell, and life begins. So yeah, it was a fun festival.
Well, anyway, Mark, thank you for taking the time to do this. This was a blast.
Yes, thank you. Thank you
You
so
can
much.
tell I love to talk, so this was this made my day.
Aw, made ours too.
Yes, yes.
Really made ours too. Take care, Mark.
Thank
Keep
you.
in touch.
Yeah,
And
thank
I'll let you
Yes.
know when this goes up too.
Yeah, so thank you
great.
so much. Thank you so much for what you've done to be a part of our life. Keep up your great work and see what's next for you.
Thanks so much. See you
Yeah,
guys.
of course.
All right, see you, Mark. Take care. Goodbye from us as well.
Yep. Goodbye from us.
Yes. And keep on the lookout for more wonderful interviews. And as always,
Keep nostalgia alive.
Nostalgia alive.
yes, remember to keep nostalgia alive, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for tuning in to another wonderful Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show interview. Be sure to follow Jake and the crew on social media and stream the show wherever you find your favorite podcasts. And as always, remember to keep nostalgia alive. Bye-bye.